Today, we'll explore how decision fatigue uniquely affects individuals with autism. We'll show you how to identify signs, understand its impact, and discover practical strategies for managing daily choices. Before we get started, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for reminders of upcoming streams. Let's get started. Howdy, Embracers.
Welcome back.
So I want to start off with the definition of decision fatigue, just in case people are listening and have never even heard of that. So just to clarify, decision fatigue is defined as having a difficulty or it being challenging to make a good decision as an experience from overwhelm. Let me try that again. That's a little wordy. So basically, it's a difficulty in making a good decision, which is experienced as a result of how many decisions you've had to make throughout a certain time period. So it's kind of like you've burnt all the fuel in your brain and you can't really make any more decisions without having certain consequences. And that's the topic that we're talking about because I have personally struggled a lot with decision fatigue. And I know that I've noticed that at least our oldest seems to struggle with it. I'm not so sure about the younger one, but I feel like our oldest definitely struggles with it.
Yeah, I think the younger one is just kind of like more spontaneous, like just kind of like do things as she goes. She's kind of a little like all over the place and very excited for everything. The oldest one definitely like if there's a disruption in like her, I don't know, planning or her day, it kind of can result in bigger concerns later or issues later. So I think that's probably where a little bit of this comes from because there are multiple points throughout the day where she would have to make a decision. So depending on how she picks or how she feels about the decision, it could impact later down the road, the rest of the day.
Yeah. So I think we first want to start off with being able to identify potential signs that your child is experiencing decision fatigue. This is something that I wanted to mention because it's something that is common in autism and ADHD. So, Matt, have you ever experienced decision fatigue, do you think, or are you pretty okay?
I don't think so. Like, I mean, some of the examples that we were talking before the episode, I was kind of trying to picture myself, and I think for the most part, like I get tired, but usually that's I think as a result of like doing something. So like as far as like if I'm driving, I'm not really necessarily like worried like if I miss a turn, for example, because I'm like, oh, I'll just kind of like go around and like re recalculate my drive essentially. But I don't necessarily like get like stressed out about it. It's more so like if I drive a lot, I get tired, but that's like normal. So I don't really think I've encountered that per se.
Yeah, so decision fatigue does impact different neurodivergent types. So that's why I brought that up because Matt has ADHD. So I was just curious. But I know it's something I particularly struggle with. And so some of the signs that you can look out for to see if your child is experiencing this is increased irritability. So if you feel like your child is starting to get really irritable or frustrated when they're coming to a point where they have to make a decision, that's something to look out for. That's something that I have noticed happens to me when I'm particularly like fatigued is anytime there's a even minor decision I have to make, like, oh, what do you want to have for lunch? Where do you want to go? What time do you want to do this thing? What outfit do you want to wear today? Like just basic small things like that. I would just be like, I don't know, you choose. Like I cannot.
So when you say like, "Oh, where do you want to go to dinner?" and I quite literally list off every single place that's a possibility for you, that's
That's
probably
like
not
the
doing
worst thing you could do.
that's
Yeah.
probably not doing any favor. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
like the
good to
worst
know.
thing you could do. So, another sign that you can look out for when it comes to decision fatigue is procrastination. So, it might be like, oh, I need you to make this choice by 1 o'clock so that we know where we're going to go out for lunch. And if I'm like procrastinating giving that answer, or if we ask our daughter, hey, where do you want to go for lunch? Let us know by this time. And she just postpones and postpones and postpones and doesn't tell us until the very last second. And then when she does, she's very frustrated or overwhelmed, or maybe can't even answer the question and just gets into like a full blown meltdown because we're asking her under like a time pressure now. That is a sign as well that she and I are struggling with decision fatigue. So if you notice that your kid does that, where they might be delaying in answering any question that involves making a choice or a decision, even if it's as simple as, do you want cookies for snack time at school tomorrow? just keep in mind that they might not be getting a meltdown as an overreaction. It might be more due to like a decision fatigue issue.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen that. I mean, kind of. I mean, in a wide spectrum of different things. I mean, anything from like picking out shoes, clothes, food, restaurant. I mean, just kind of like. I mean, I think quite literally, like pretty much at some point, each decision that she's had to make throughout her life, at one point or another, there would have been kind of that inner challenge or inner struggle that she has to kind of make a decision, essentially.
Yeah. And honestly, again, these could be like micro decisions. In fact, if you're seeing it more with the micro decisions than the major decisions, because everyone can get overwhelmed with a major decision, it's really like, are you seeing it with minor decisions, like which flavor toothpaste do you want, or something like that? Another sign to look out for is difficulty concentrating. So, if you notice that your kid is struggling to focus on a task that requires decision making, that's another indicator that they're struggling with decision fatigue. So, it might just be like you're kind of like burning too much of that fuel. You're kind of on empty and you basically just got fumes left. So, you get frustrated and more irritable and you have a harder time concentrating because you don't have much to work with at that point when it comes to that fatigue aspect. And then, of course, as a result of all three of these, you could see them experiencing overwhelm. And when it comes to autism, our favorite form of overwhelm, of course, I say that sarcastically, is the meltdown, because that's what happens. Is you will see a big meltdown, or you could see a shutdown, which is basically the difference between externalizing the emotion versus internalizing the emotion.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to think. As far as like when we do encounter that, I'm trying to think of how often like our like oldest will kind of like either remove herself from the situation to kind of like try and recover, or if she actually kind of like stays and tries to like work through. I think it's kind of like a split. Like sometimes she'll get so overwhelmed that she'll have to like kind of like remove herself and go to like a comfortable place like her bedroom with like her stuffed animals or something. But then sometimes like she will just kind of like stay in kind of the area until she's kind of able to work through or kind of stumble through making choices. But we do definitely do see, depending on the day, how she kind of works through some of those choices.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to the overwhelm part because I have definitely felt mentally exhausted after having to make multiple decisions throughout the day. And everybody makes multiple decisions throughout the day. So it's pretty frequent that, like, by the end of the day, I'm kind of like in the I don't care, do whatever you want phase. But one of the ways that that manifests for me is more in like a shutdown mode. I'm the type of person that if I have had to make a ton of these decisions throughout the day, which as a parent to a neurodivergent child is a lot because you're working on conversations surrounding IEPs, medical decisions, like financial decisions, all sorts of things that you do as a parent. At the end of the day, I basically have nothing left. And so for me, my form of overwhelm is just kind of like checking out mentally and just being able to it's kind of like when you put your computer on sleep mode. So it's like kind of like putting my brain on sleep mode and
Like
just like
running in
letting
the
it hibernate.
background, but like
Yeah. It's
not
like I'm
really.
still there. I'm still conscious for emergencies. You can boot me back up, but just let me hibernate a little bit so I can kind of reserve my energy and kind of get back to where I need to be.
See,
And I feel like that's the same thing with our oldest because that's why she wants her like quiet space. What does she call it? Like a tent or something?
or like her, like
Fort.
yeah.
Fort. She likes to call it a fort. That's what it is.
Well, I'm wondering, like, I'm like reflecting on like my own life a little bit now, and I'm wondering if part of that is because like as I was like growing up in like my family structure, it wasn't necessarily like we would like make a decision of sorts. It was kind of like we were given the illusion of like a decision to make, but
Yeah.
then like we knew like you're not actually being asked this, like the decision is already like out of your hands kind of thing. And that's why like um I think nowadays, because I kind of just go with the flow essentially. So I'm trying to think like if you and I wanted to go out to dinner and I wanted to go out to, I don't know, Taco Bell, and you said, "Oh no, let's go to Chick-fil-A." I'd be like, "Okay, we'll go to Chick-fil-A." Like I'm not enough invested into like stake down like on my like, I don't know. That's not like my bridge that I'm gonna die on kind of thing. It's kind of like, okay, like it's good enough.
See, but
Um,
that's actually
I mean, not a
terrible
great.
combia
Right, but that's
for
not right,
somebody
but
like me.
that's what my thing is, like, it's probably not a good thing, but
No,
I'm kind of
because then
just
it
like
puts all the onus on me to make the decision, and that's,
right.
like, what I'm having a problem with.
Right, and that's the struggle because I think when I was growing up, we would always be asked like, "Oh, where do you wanna, like, go get food or whatever. And if we gave a decision, sometimes we'd get in trouble based on like, oh, that choice is too expensive. Oh, it's too far, or whatever the choice is. So we would automatically, like my siblings, we'd be just basically like, oh, wherever you want to go is fine, to like remove the choice from us to assign it to someone else who's driving, essentially.
Now, what's interesting is I want to put a pin in that because I kind of want to circle back to that thought. But what's interesting is the first step that you kind of have to go through is really understanding what happens as a result of decision fatigue and like how that impacts our kids before we can then implement solutions, which I think that you're onto something there, which is why I want to pin that one.
Oh gosh,
Um,
that's a scary thought.
unintentionally, but you're onto something there, I think.
Uh,
But I think one of the first things that we have to like recognize with decision fatigue is that it can result in cognitive overload, which basically means that when you're making decisions over and over and over and over, it is gradually depleting your brain resources, basically. So, like, you are just mentally draining yourself. And it's very similar to that metaphor that we use about like the bucket full of water. Like, if you keep putting things in your bucket, eventually it gets full and overflows. And you have to make sure that you're not like overflowing that bucket. And it's the same concept with like your mental resources. Like, you cannot continuously put stuff in there and it'll just like overflow, and that's where you get the overwhelm and the meltdowns. So what you're supposed to really do is find a way to decrease that, because if you don't, what do we see with our kids? We see a
same
spike in
same thing, right? Behavior
like
and
anxiety,
right.
stress, and like how do you see that in our oldest? Like, how does that usually manifest with her?
Well, I mean, aside from like meltdowns, we'll see it like in behavioral. I mean, as far as like talking back, we'll see it as in her like screaming sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to
Avoidance,
avoid. I'm trying to think of all the things that I mean, like the
elopement.
school. Well, I was gonna say the school has basically told us a nice like list of like things that the like behaviors that they see, and it's because of likely. I mean, kind of a similar situation, I would assume, in some
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. So basically what happens is as you have seen, and I'm sure many of you out there have seen with your own children, is you get that spike in anxiety levels, and because of that, they end up having more behaviors. And the other thing that we've noticed is a correlation between that and when our child is in an unfamiliar or high pressure situation. That tends to kind of escalate the behavior or escalate the feelings that they're feeling. And I know for me, that's particularly triggering. That's why one of the key anxieties that I have is driving to unfamiliar locations. Like, for me, that's kind of like one of my autism quirks, is that I get a lot of anxiety driving to a place I've never been to before. And that's mostly because it is part of that decision fatigue where I feel like I have to make so many micro decisions trying to get to that place, and I'm not sure that I'm doing the right thing. And then there's another decision based off of that decision. It's like a domino effect that just completely depletes all my mental resources. And then when that happens, I'm just left with overwhelm. So that's why it's important with our kiddos to kind of tune in on how they're feeling when it comes to any even small choice we're asking them, essentially.
Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, this is like an ongoing. I mean, we've been dealing with this for years. I mean, it's like an ongoing thing. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
because you can't really get away from like having to have your like children make decisions. I mean, it even gets like worse as you get older because obviously
Yeah.
you're making more decisions than you would
And
when
they
you're
have
like a
more on
toddler.
the
So,
line.
right. So, I mean, it's not like it's like a oh we solved it and then like that's kind of that. It's like no, every single day we're encountering new choices that we we can have challenging experiences with.
Yep. So, as a result of that, what happens is that you actually get a reduced quality of your decisions and decision making. So, if you're getting fatigued, you're getting overwhelmed, you're getting frustrated, your heart rate's going up, you have anxiety, obviously, as a result, your quality decisions are going to go down. Like, you cannot concentrate as effectively, you can't make like the most optimal decision. And because of that, you end up making a poor decision or maybe one you wouldn't have made otherwise. And that can result in regret. And I've definitely seen that with our oldest where she'll get overwhelmed. We'll say, like, which one of these things do you want? She'll like blurt something out. And then when she gets it, she's upset because that's not the one she actually wanted. And it's because she felt pressured to have to make that decision when she was basically burnt out and she ended up making what she feels like was the wrong decision.
Well, I always think of our niece when she couldn't decide between the two different types of ice creams, and then we're
Oh
like,
yeah.
just pick. We're like, just okay. The next one you say, that's the one that we're going with. And so she blurted out one of the flavors of ice cream. We're like, okay, we'll get that one. And then like as we're in the car at home, she's like trying to like take it from like our other niece, like her ice cream, and we're like, no, you got that one. That's the one you want. And then we find out like later, like she accidentally said the opposite one that she wanted because she like got panicked with like making the choice. So I
Yeah.
always kind of think back to that as like kind of like the extreme decision for
Yeah.
like choice fatigue a little bit.
And she is neurodivergent, so it's likely that that really was what was happening.
Right. And I mean, obviously this was, gosh, like 10 years ago, or like, I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was so long ago,
She
but
was
I mean,
probably about the same age as our oldest at this point.
yeah,
So
I guess, yeah.
it's kind of something that we're trying to keep our eye on in terms of how she's reacting to these decisions. There are luckily a lot of things that you can do to put in place to help make this easier. There's some things that I've been able to put in place for myself, but again, if you're dealing with something unpredictable, it makes it hard to put a plan in place. So if it's going to be like an unpredictable spur of the moment situation, you just kind of have to prepare for the fact that your kid is probably not going to respond well to that. But if you have any control whatsoever to that potential decision that's coming up, there are some things you can do to help prevent that and get them in a good place. So, one of those things is something that we learned early on in actually speech and feeding therapy with our kids, and that is simplifying choices. So, instead of saying, like, okay, what do you want for breakfast? Here's a list of like 10 things. You could have the muffin, the cereal, the banana, and just rattling on and then having them make a choice. Minimize the decision. So simplify it for them so it's not as overwhelming. So just give them 2 or 3 options. Do you want a banana or a muffin? And that's one basic way to kind of calm that anxiety down.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Or, well, I was going to say, like, if only we could just give them like one choice, like oatmeal. But like, I mean, obviously,
That's
like, yeah,
not one
I
choice. That's like an oxymoron.
I know, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I was also thinking, like, when you're going over that, I was like, I guess you could create, like, like, the little, like, spinner things that you, like, spin and it, like, gives you, like, an option. I was
Like
like,
the
we just, like,
wheel of
yeah,
choices.
yeah, like, if you didn't care about, like, any in particular, you could just, like, spin it and be like, "That's what we're doing." Like, I mean, obviously, like, that's not really, like, making a choice, it's just, like, going
But that is
randomly.
actually avoiding the choice that
I
because
guess
something
that's
else is making
true.
the choice for you. So it doesn't
I
really
Right.
solve the problem of how will they make a choice. Because in life, your kids are going to grow up to be adults who need to make choices at some point. So avoiding the choice making process, I think, would probably make it worse.
It's kinda like the, Two-Face, in Batman, like, just flipping the coin and then going off of that.
Yeah, I think that's a bad choice.
Well, but yeah, but I mean, you never know. He could have been ADHD or something.
So the next thing that you can do is incorporate more routine and structure. So that's something that everybody in the autism world is pretty familiar with. So establishing like consistent routines, I think that helps put in the predictability. So then those choices can be made with ample time and they don't have to worry about it the minute of. So the way that that kind of manifests for me is I get a lot more anxiety with food choices. I don't know why that's just always been something I've struggled with is like, what am I going to eat? It really stresses me out. And so I've noticed that if I plan all my meals like the day before, like if the day before I'm thinking about, okay, tomorrow for lunch I can have this or this or this, it's so much easier on me when the time comes than if I have to make that decision either the day of or like within that half hour, hour. That point, I'm already stressed and overwhelmed, and I feel like there's a time crunch.
I feel so bad because I'm thinking of like our entire marriage. And I mean, even as of like yesterday, and I'm like, because I'm always asking you, like, hey, babe, like, what do you want for dinner? And like, even after like we eat lunch, I'm like trying to like prep you, like, oh, okay, like we have to probably figure something out for dinner. Like, what are you thinking? And I'm like, if that's like your like main struggle and like
It
choices,
is.
I'm
That's why I always say, I don't know.
right. But like I'm saying, like, because I try to, I like to try and like accommodate as best I can. So if like you're saying like, oh, I would really like pork or something or like steak or chicken or whatever, like I want to try and make sure like we have that to actually make it. So I'm trying to like figure out like what diet your or food you want for that next meal, but realizing that you hate that
Yeah.
choice, it really kind of
You're triggering me.
a little bit.
But this is actually also very common in
Oh,
couples. Like a lot of times there's like the running joke about how the woman in the relationship struggles with figuring out what to eat. So it's not that uncommon. But for me, it's more of an issue because I'm so picky with so many of my foods because of sensory issues that it makes it a challenge. And like I get frustrated around food decisions
Well, I've always
just
heard of
because
the
of that.
joke where it's like the guy asks the girl, like, "Oh, where do you or guess what I'm thinking of where we're going for dinner?" And then whatever the woman says, "You guessed it right, we're going there." Like, so
That
you're
doesn't
just
work for me. I'd be like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
What are
know.
you thinking? So that's another option. Another thing that you can do is prioritize decisions. So if you know that your kid is struggling with decision fatigue, throughout the day, you make a lot of decisions. I mean, I don't remember the statistic, but I mean, I had read a rather large number of how many micro decisions you make throughout the day. And so if you know every day you're going to have to make decisions and your child's going to have to make decisions, if you know there's going to be important decisions coming up in the near future, make sure you prioritize those in the next day. So like if you have to choose like back to school stuff and you're like, okay, you have to decide, are you wanting to do homeschool or you want to go to school? This is the deadline. You make sure that you prioritize asking that choice earlier in the day when they have all their brain capacity and an energy rather than at the end of the day where they've already exhausted all that mental energy by making all these micro decisions throughout the day.
That's a good idea. Well, I was just thinking, for like our oldest, like she's very much into like as far as like appearance and how she like wants different tutus every day. But I've noticed that like occasionally, like if I ask her like, oh, what do you want to wear? She'll try and find something. But I've also noticed like if we pick out like clothes for the entire week and give her kind of more control of like, oh, on Tuesday we're gonna wear this and this and this. She actually has fun with that because she knows that she wants to wear a red tutu with whatever type of shirt or whatever. And then she can say like, "Oh, I know I'm going to put it in my like Wednesday basket." And then she knows on Wednesday that's what I'm going to wear. But then she can set up her entire week that way. And then she knows like each day she can wear something that she picked out and that she actually likes to wear. So it's not like on that individual day, it's kind of an all or nothing. Do you get to wear what you want to wear or something that you don't want? It's kind of like she kind of coordinates her week essentially so she can pick out as best she can.
Yeah,
That's
and
what I'm saying.
actually, you make a good point because the other thing that you can do to help with your kids' decision fatigue is to help delegate some of those decisions. So that's basically what you're doing there is instead of her having to go in and decide all these outfits for the week, you're going in and helping her decide these. So I do that sometimes where I go in and I'm like, "Okay, we have to pick out our outfits." And instead of showing her the entire closet, I'm like, okay, would you like a pink shirt or a purple shirt? Do you want a dress or do you want like a shirt and shorts? And by narrowing those decisions down and kind of guiding her throughout that process, it makes it easier for her to do it. So that is actually a good point is delegating some of that out is actually a really good way to kind of deal with this problem.
See, I have good ideas sometimes, like
You do it naturally without thinking it.
sure.
The other thing you can do is if you feel like your kid is getting overwhelmed or fatigued, you notice some of those behaviors that I mentioned earlier with the irritability, procrastination, concentration, overwhelm. You can also just put in scheduled breaks throughout the day. So if you know that important decisions are coming up, that you have a moment in time that you've set aside before that decision has to be made where they don't have to worry about anything, no decisions being made. And that includes small ones like don't do it around mealtime where they have to figure out what they're eating. Don't do it during any sort of structured activity. Just give them kind of like free time right before that decision. And then once they come in, they'll come in refreshed. And then you can work on that major decision or minor decision. However, major and minor kind of depends on the perspective of the kid.
Well, I mean, and honestly, I mean, it changes depending on circumstances. I mean, like sometimes like for like a school day, like picking out your clothes might be a major decision. Just because like you sometimes have to get out the door. So I mean it definitely kind of I could think kind of shifts a little bit depending on what the circumstances are for like that day or week. So
Yeah. And all of this also applies to nonverbal kiddos. It's just you would be doing it slightly different. But for example, with our youngest one, what we've noticed is her decision anxiety tends to push her more towards that nonverbal. She is verbal, but she has kind of like selective mutism where sometimes her words will just kind of shut down, and she prefers to kind of point to pictures instead. And so for those moments and those kiddos, it would be beneficial to help support them with the use of like visual aids. So if your kid is showing some of the signs of decision fatigue and you see some of those behavioral changes, you can implement some sort of like visual schedules or visual choice boards to help them make those decisions. So instead of asking them, for example, do you want carrots or tomatoes? Just give them the pictures and let them point to it so that they don't even have to speak if they're a speaker. And if they're nonverbal, they can still express and communicate what they want. But again, make sure that you reduce the amounts. So not having an overwhelming amount of choices for them to look at on the visual aid.
And honestly, sometimes when she does lose the ability to like say things, I wonder if that is in part connection with like decision fatigue. Like, because there are times like, I mean, she speaks. I mean, she does not as much as like our oldest, but she, I mean, knows the words. But sometimes like she will really resort back to like no words and basically just pointing or like opting to make sounds instead. And I'm wondering if some of that might have a little bit to do with like decision fatigue, where she's kind of overloaded and she doesn't want to even like say anything because it would be kind of too much for her. So she would rather just kind of make noises or like point to like something on like her little like PEX chart.
Yeah, and that's the difference between our two girls too is the older one is more likely to melt down and the younger one is more like me where she's more likely to shut down. So it just depends on the personality of your kid and whether they tend to lean more towards external behaviors, meltdown, or internalizing with the shutdown on how you would kind of approach that. But I think that a lot of these are things that we're actually using ourselves and actually seeing pretty decent results with. We have had a few little moments with meltdowns, but honestly, I think like every time we implement these things, it kind of solves it right then and there. It's like it ends the meltdown because we've kind of removed that extra anxiety level from them.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been pretty decent as far as like making like new charts, just to try and like simplify things for like decision making, so they can kind of see what their options are, and then that's kind of helped along the way as well. But again, it's kind of like evolving each step of the process where we kind of get snagged on an area where we're like, oh, okay, we need to try and figure out how to like navigate this a little easier for them. And then Leah goes off and makes a nice little chart and comes back with it laminated and puts it on the wall.
I was
So,
just about to say, I was like, if you have not yet,
oh
invest
my
in
goodness.
a cheap little Amazon Basics laminator and get some visual aids that you can either find free on a Google search or you can custom make them. I custom make my own using like Canva or online software systems that are free. And you can basically just create a bunch of visual aids throughout your house that are relevant and help with these choices. So yeah, that's pretty much all we have in regards to that. We're hoping that these tips can help you guys manage decision fatigue with your kids. I know that we've seen it really enhance the quality of our kids' daily lives. So that's something that I personally work with for myself too. So hopefully you guys are able to implement some of these. If you have more suggestions, please do let us know. Um, we want to know like what your tips are. If your kids have more of a meltdown or shutdown situation going, do you see them struggle with decision fatigue? Do you notice those kind of trademark signs with the shutdown, the increased irritability, the procrastination? Do you see any of those behaviors? If so, please leave us some comments on our YouTube or Facebook page at Autism Wish. We'll continue the conversation there with you guys. We also have our private Embracing Autism community, which you can join on autismwish.org. You'll get exclusive access to Matt and I, as well as some other awesome resources we have there, and a group of other parents who get where you are in this journey. So thanks for hanging out with us, and I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We hope to see you next time.
And go make some choices.
Good choices, but not
Good
too many so
choices.
you don't get fatigued.
All right, we'll see you next
Bye.
time. Bye.